I think it's so easy when we get in the trenches of desires unfulfilled and seasons that we just don't want to be in, we feel like life has passed us by.
Well, welcome to the A Little More Courage podcast. I am so excited to be here with Tiffany. And before we get into it, before we hear, and also if you have never met Tiffany before, for sure go and follow her. She's an absolutely, seriously wonderful human being. But I just wanted to give a quick shout out because today's podcast is sponsored by Crossover. And I remember when I first moved from New Zealand to Los Angeles and I didn't know anybody. And the thing I needed the most was community. And I really needed Christian community. And this is exactly what Crossover does is we're going to put the link in the caption of this podcast. But what you'll do is you fill out this form and they're going to connect you with a local church near where you are. And I just believe in the power of local churches. So thank you, Crossover, for sponsoring this podcast. But Tiffany, you are amazing, and I just want to, the thing I want to call out and compliment in you is your wisdom. You're a very wise person beyond your years. I was reading this study the other day, and they were saying that wisdom from the ages of 17 to 70 is not actually defined by age. And so you can meet somebody who is 27 who is wiser than somebody that is 50. That the years that pass us doesn't mean we necessarily are wiser, but I just want to encourage that you are just a woman of wisdom. But Tiff, would you just tell us who you are? What does your life look like now? And just for someone who's never met you before, what would be great to know about you?
Well, goodness, first of all, what an intro. Thank you so much. I'm very honored that you would have me and just your sweet, kind words. And just getting to see you and just spend this time with you is truly such a joy for me. But let's see. My name is Tiffany. I am a writer. I started a blog, a decade ago. Yeah, actually, 2013, I believe, was when I first launched my blog. And that's crazy, actually. But yeah, I'm in a season of life right now where I have been married for 2.5 years. Actually, tomorrow is the 3-year anniversary of when I met my husband. November 16th, we met 2020. Yes. And then we got married literally 6-7 months later. So we'll get into that. And then I also have a 5.5-month-old little boy. His name is Shepherd. He is the joy of my life, absolute joy of my life. And yeah, I have been sharing my life online, I guess, for the greater part of a decade. And I've always felt like the Lord has really called me to be vulnerable with certain parts of my life and my story. And before I was married, obviously, as a single girl, I really loved connecting with other singles and just encouraging people in their singleness, girls and guys, just to wait for the right one. And, I was sharing that as I was waiting too, and you can definitely relate to that because you did that and have done that still, just encouraging people in that season. And so, yeah, I think I have a heart specifically for young girls, especially I don't know why, juniors and seniors in high school are kind of my sweet spot, to be honest. Just because I remember that being just such a tender age, such a vulnerable time in life. But all girls of all ages, I have a heart for, and just really wanting them to know their value and their worth in a way that I really didn't know when I was their age, that I didn't really come to know until honestly much later in life. So
what would you say to that age of you? How old is that? I grew up in New Zealand, so I'm when you say junior, I'm I have no idea what age that is.
let's see, juniors and seniors in high school would be like 17, 18 years old.
Okay. What would you say, what would be the one thing you would love to say to your 17-year-old self?
That's a really good question. I really and truly would have encouraged myself to fall in love with Jesus. And like, I think at the time I really would not have understood what that meant. Like, I would have heard that meant like, oh, that's nice. But like, I really wouldn't have known what that meant. And I think if I could go back to tell myself something, I would really say like, invest in not just knowing about Jesus, but like really, really knowing him, knowing his person, his character, his love, not just like being able to know facts about him. My parents were missionaries, so I grew up in Mexico City from the ages of 3 until I was 18. I didn't move to the States until I was going to college. As growing up as a Christian, like you kind of think you know everything. You don't really think that you're the one that the messages are for on Sundays, or, you know, like you read your Bible, but there's not really a whole lot there for you. I guess at least that was my experience. And it wasn't until, much later that I really learned who the real Jesus was and fell in love with him. And that changed my life. So, yeah, I think if I could, I would go back and tell her to fall in love with Jesus and to make that the mission and the goal of my life. Not finding a guy, not even pursuing a career, but like, if you want the dream, Jesus is the dream. And you want a husband, but Jesus is the greatest husband you could ever have. So yeah, I think that's how I would say.
I love that. And now I remember one day I was driving through LA, and all of a sudden I had this vision, and I was walking down the aisle to Jesus, and then I had a man who came next to me and walked with me. But it transformed me because I was so, like, as a teenager and a young adult, I was obsessed with marriage. I was like, I cannot wait to get married. And I didn't realize, I wish I had the same thing as you. I wish I had known sooner that the only person that can satisfy your soul is Jesus. And like, and even if you want to know how to be a good friend or a good wife, it's Jesus who is going to teach you, because Jesus is love, and he's going to be the best teacher for you to become a better lover. But now you are married, you have a kid, but tell us your love story.
Oh, it's my favorite story to tell. So I met my husband literally 3 years ago tomorrow, through a mutual friend. She set us up on a blind date. It was the most random thing. Like, I literally, thinking about it now, I'm like, wow, that is so crazy how just literally from one day to the next, she was like, and she was kind of a newer friend too. It wasn't someone that I had known for very long. She literally one day, like out of the blue, it wasn't even like when we first met or anything. Like, we've been friends for, I don't know, at least a couple months. And out of the blue one day, she was like, hey, I actually think I might know someone for you. It was a family friend of hers. And she reached out to him and asked him if he was seeing anyone, if he was open to being set up. And he was like, yeah, I'm totally open to it. So, of course, she had sent me a picture of him and sent him a picture of me. So, is it really a blind date if you have seen a picture? I don't know. I guess I'm still saying yes. It was a blind date because we'd never actually met or knew anything about each other. But she gave him my number, and he like called me the next day, asked me on the phone if he could take me out.
What a gentleman.
I know, right? Or that for my like first green flag actually calls, doesn't text. And then we met for the very first time on a lunch date. It was like, I think it was a Monday at lunch or something. And it's fun.
What was your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. I was so excited. I remember being so nervous. And it's funny because at the time I was taking videos of my process of going on this date and like on dates with him, and I was posting it on my close friends on Instagram. So I have all of the videos of like my immediate, like I have a video of myself on my way to the date, and like a video that I took like right after I got done where I'm like telling all my close friends like how it went. It's actually like so fun to look back on. But I was so nervous. I was excited because I had heard such great things about this guy. He was obviously completely gorgeous, and I just couldn't believe that someone who looked like him wanted to go out with me. but like the whole day I was just thinking like, wow, it's so easy to talk to him. He was so like such a good conversationalist, so personable. And of course on a first date, you talk about all of like like you talk about your family, it's your jobs, like kind of not surface level, but a little bit, surface level stuff. But even that was just so easy. And I remember that first date feeling like, this is so easy. Like, it doesn't feel forced at all. And like, we probably could have stayed talking on that date for like 2 hours, but it was literally in the middle of the workday. So like, he had to go back to work. But it's fun now because we live literally 5 minutes from the restaurant where we met. So every year we go back to that same restaurant on that day. So we have a reservation for tomorrow night. But anyways, yeah. And then we saw each other almost every single day after that. So that was, November 16th was the day we met. We like officially started dating, I think at the beginning of December. And then he met my whole family at Christmas. He literally came with me. My family lives all over the world. My parents live in Mexico. My sister and her family live in Brazil. So like my whole family was coming in town for Christmas to go to Colorado. He literally came with us. This was like, less than a month, or a little over a month since we had met. He like came to Colorado with me for Christmas. We got engaged in February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. He proposed in the middle of a literal blizzard. And then we got married June 6th. So from meeting to married in like, what is that, 7 months? November to June.
I thought it was impressive. Jack and I met and married in a year.
Yeah.
And I thought that was impressive.
That is impressive. That is, and like, that's what I tell people. Like, you don't understand. Like, I don't feel like my story and my love story with Sam can be explained with reason. It is only through something that God could have done, that we could be married, that like we could have found, dated, got engaged, and married in such a short amount of time. I remember telling myself like I would never marry someone that I hadn't dated or at least known for a year. But that's just what the Lord does when you are so to him. Like, of course, not everybody's, story is the same, or like the love story doesn't necessarily have to be the same or to be that quick necessarily. But I do feel like when you are living a life that is surrendered, God's timing is not contingent on our plans or on the timelines that we set. Like, oh, I have to know him for at least a year. Well, what if God said now is the time? And one of my favorite quotes is from from Craig Rochelle, who says, when it's not God's timing, you cannot force it. But when it is God's timing, you cannot stop it. And that is really like the story of me and Sam. Like, it really was God's timing. He was in every piece and part of us coming together and our families meeting and our families being on board and everybody being excited. And like, I remember being very cautious in the sense that I didn't want to move too quickly outside of obviously like God's provision. And so we invited both of our families into our relationship in the sense that we gave the people closest to us permission to be honest with us and to share with us if they felt like something didn't feel right, or if they felt like we were moving too quickly or whatever it was. Like, we had wise counsel around us speaking into our lives who were keeping us accountable and who had the freedom to, for lack of a better term, intervene if needed. Now, thankfully, obviously this was totally led by the Lord, so our families were completely on board and everything was honestly beautiful and seamless. And now we're married and we've been married 2.5 years and have a baby, and like, just life has never been better.
Wow.
So
that's such an amazing story. I think Jack and I felt the same way. We felt like it was faith and obedience. Like, our timetable was faith and obedience to God. But I think in order for these kind of stories that you and I both have, that are kind of abnormal in today's world, it's what is so important is the how you steward your singleness.
Oh, yeah.
And the intimacy you create with the Lord, because if I couldn't hear God speaking about Jack and I and our timeline, I would have missed it. And like, I wouldn't have known what he wanted. But in my singleness, one of the biggest goals I had was to learn to hear the voice of God and to build a relationship with him and to build like a connection with him. And also just to put a lot of investment into who I was and how God was creating me and in my character, so that for your story, I'm sure it was the same. What was some of like the best decisions you made in singleness?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I would agree. I think I also, funny enough, had a huge goal of knowing the voice of God, and I think one of the best decisions I made in singleness was truly to lean into my relationship with the Lord and to kind of, like I said earlier, like really fall in love with him. And because I knew, like, I think I knew in my heart that I was going to get married someday, even though, like, obviously there's no, I guess necessarily, there's no promise of that, I guess, in scripture. But I just knew. I knew that the Lord wanted to give me the desires of my heart. And so knowing that like I was going to get married someday, I think the choices that I made in singleness were to invest and really just be rooted where he has planted me. I always would say this, to get busy with what God has me busy with. And that doesn't mean like busyness for busyness sake, but like he had and has a plan and a purpose for exactly where you are now. And so I knew in my singleness, God has a plan and a purpose for me. And he is not waiting to use me until I get married. He is not waiting for my life to start until I meet someone else. Like, he has things for me to do for the kingdom now. And so I think one of the best choices I made was to really invest in that. And even more than that, or even deeper than that, I should say, like, I think I really learned in my singleness that life with Jesus is the best life. There is no life that is better than a life outside of life with him. And so I think like I don't want to say it necessarily. I mean, I did find contentment, obviously. Like, I loved my life as a single girl. I think when I met Sam was the happiest I had ever been, the most joyful I had ever been in my singleness. Like, I was loving life. It was amazing. But I don't necessarily think that God requires us to be content in our seasons of life before he gives us good gifts. Jackie Hill Perry she posted something about that a while back. And I remember being convicted by it because I remember thinking like, you have to be content in your singleness before God will bring you a husband. And even though it's like, that's a good thought, that's actually putting God in a box to say like, oh, well, he can't work outside of your contentment. And when Jackie Hill Perry posted that, I remember being like, oh, wow, that's actually a really good point. Like, God's not confined even by my own contentment. He wants us to be content. I think he has it, like, of course, he desires a relationship with us. But anyway, that's beside the point. I think to answer your question, I think one of the best decisions I made in my singleness was really to know God for who he is, to fall deeply in love with him, to learn how to read the word, I would say is another huge one. Like, really learning how to read scripture in a way that wasn't just kind of superficial devotional, but like actual study, and respecting the text for the ancient book that it is, and learning the ways that are required to understanding the books of the Bible and the different literary structures and the context of certain books, all that.
If somebody has never read the word with like a commentary or at this kind of level that you're talking about,
yeah,
what's like some like beginner tools that you would suggest to them?
That's a really good question. Honestly, this is not a cop-out. I really do believe that the Bible Project has some of the best Bible study tools out there. Not only are they obviously like accurate, but like very user-friendly. They have incredible YouTube videos. They have incredible Bible study resources. They even have like a classroom type thing. I actually haven't done it myself, but I know that they have it. And so I really do think that for someone who's wanting to study the word and to know God more and to read the Bible more, than just like a kind of superficial devotion, I would really recommend the Bible Project as a starting point, because it's going to be a very, just a very good way to give you a good idea of what it is this Bible is all about, and like the specific books of the Bible. And they just have so much, even just on their YouTube channel, like explaining kind of everything in a very helpful, hands-on way. That would be my recommendation. And then what else? Really, it's just as simple as like picking a book. Pick a book. Like open up your Bible, point your finger, and the book that it falls on. Decide, okay, I'm going to spend the next month reading this one book. And take your time. Go slowly. Go chapter by chapter, verse by verse. Take notes. Look up the context. Like use Bible Project to like figure out, okay, what's going on here historically? Who is talking? Who are they talking to? When in history is this happening? Kind of the basic who, what, when, where, why questions. And then just take your time. And another thing, I think, last thing I'll say is pray. Because the Holy Spirit wants to reveal himself to you. And he does that when we read his word. So if you come to God and just say, Lord, I want to know you more. Would you show me who you are? And then you open up your Bible and you start to read, you will be amazed what God will reveal to you as you read when you humbly come to him and say, I just want to know you more. That's a really great way to start getting to know the Bible and to really get to know God.
Yeah, that's so good. I love how you broke that down with such helpful, practical advice.
I think that's important to like give people practical, kind of small bites, because the Bible can be really intimidating. Like it is very intimidating. Like, hello, it's a huge book and it's an ancient text. Like this, it's crazy. It's crazy like how intimidating this can be, and honestly how hard it is to read. Like I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Like there are books that I am intimidated by and that I just don't understand. But I don't know. I just think it is more approachable than we make it out to be if we just know where to start.
Jack and I started this whole podcast. Also, I didn't even share, but Jack is sick at the moment. That's why Tiff and I are doing this podcast together. We started this podcast because we wanted to just have a lot of conversations around courage. Mm-hmm. And so, Tiff, I would love to also know from you two things. What would courage look like in singleness, or what did courage look like in your singleness? Mm-hmm. And then what does courage, or how does that look like since getting married?
Yeah, two really good questions. I thought about this one when you sent it to me, and I think it in singleness, I think it takes a lot of courage, not just to know, but to really believe who and whose you are. I think one of the biggest hurdles I had in my singleness was believing God's words about me. And I was more insecure and just more unsure of who I was than I think I ever really wanted to admit. And that translated into making a lot of decisions from that place of like insecurity, especially when it came to relationships, that looking back, I wish I could have done differently. Like I really do. I wish that I could have made better decisions based on knowing who I really was. And so I think it takes courage to read the word, to read what God says in Psalm 139, and to believe his words, to not just let it sit in your head and think, oh, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. That sounds really nice. But to let those words actually permeate your heart and transform your life. It takes courage. It takes faith to really believe that, and to live from that place of knowing and being confident in, I am a daughter of God. I am made in such a way that I am to be treated as a princess, as a queen, like as a daughter of God, as a co-heir with Christ. Like when we know, and truly, when we really know what that means, and we take that for what it is, like you live out of that place in a completely different way than you ever had or ever could before. And so, but it takes courage, I think, to to believe God. It does. It takes courage to say, like, you know what? I may not feel this, but I'm going to trust that your word is true and that this is the truth about me and that I don't have to go dumpster diving for affection and attention because I have it from God on high.
Yeah, that's so that I just wanted to add, I had a pastor in New Zealand and he said, you date your self-esteem. And I think that when we really like trust what God says about us and that he means this and these things, these scriptures that you just quoted, then our self-esteem is actually gonna rise. It's gonna be more of a God esteem than even self-esteem. And then from that place, you're gonna end up dating people that are better fit for you because you know you're worth it. I remember like when I first moved to America, I was just dating guys and I look back and I'm like, what were you thinking? But it's because I didn't know my identity and I didn't know what it meant to be a daughter of God. So yeah, from that point, what would you say courage looks like in a relationship?
Oh, man. I think in a relationship and in marriage specifically, because of course in relationships, you still want to be vulnerable, but in marriage, it's a completely different kind of vulnerability. But I think that it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, to lay yourself bare in front of someone, your pride, your insecurities, every flaw, every blemish that you have, like you cannot hide in marriage. And so I do think it takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, I have given myself to this person before the Lord. Therefore, they deserve all of me, even the parts that I'm afraid to look at myself. But yeah, and it takes a lot of courage to be humble, to enter through the low door of humility every single day. And, to really like strip yourself of pride. It takes courage to do that. But you know what? It's definitely, I have seen now, and we're only 2.5 years in. Who are we to be giving marital advice? Like, catch me 20 years from now giving advice. But I will say, like, I think one of the best things that has happened in our marriage over the course of the past 2 years is trusting each other enough to lay down our pride and to be vulnerable in such a way that we can be honest with each other and really call each other higher. I think that's something that Sam and I say a lot is like, we're calling each other higher in this moment. Like, I see something in you that we both know needs to change and you may not want to admit it right now, but like, we know that the Lord's trying to work on that area, and it takes courage to say, like, you know what, I hate this. I hate that you're calling this out in me. I want to run and hide. I want to point the finger and say, no, you're the one who's just treating me this way, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, like, we need our spouses to call us higher and to call out when we are dealing with sin or pride or whatever it is. And like I said, to be to really humble yourself before your spouse, before the Lord. Yeah, that's not easy to do. It still is not easy to do. And, definitely don't do it perfectly if well at all. But it's every day, I think that's one of the beautiful things about marriage is that I get to do this every day with Sam. And I get to live life with him forever calling me higher and vice versa. And it's not about doing it perfectly. It's just about doing it together.
I would so echo everything you said because for me, marriage has truly been one of the greatest pictures of the gospel where, I just think about how Jesus, he came down to earth and he took all of our sin and all the things that we had done upon himself to the cross. And he died for us. And in marriage, there's that same thing. It's just like dying to yourself so you can love somebody else. And this unity where you get to just stand there and be like, this is who I am, where you still choose me. Like, you have a really tough day or you show pride, or even 2 days ago, I had said something to somebody that was way too stern and too direct, and it wasn't as loving as I could have been. And after the phone call, Jack just straight up called me out and called me higher for it. And I like wanted to like turn it around and be like, how could you? Like I got like in defense mode, and I had to just slow myself down and be like, here is a man that saw me do something not graciously and yet loves me enough to not leave me where I am. And he wants to be that iron sharpen iron and call me higher. I love that. Call me higher. But just Tiff, as we end, when I was just thinking about this podcast and preparing for it, I just kept thinking of a girl a woman who doesn't have hope right now. And whether it's in her singleness or her career or friendships, and just take this question wherever you want, what would you say to her?
I would want her to know, first and foremost, that she's not alone. I think one of the things the enemy does very successfully a lot is to make us feel isolated and to convince us beyond belief that we are so alone and that nobody has felt the way that we felt or feels what we feel or wants anything to do with us or just wants us isolated. Because if the enemy can get us isolated, he can do anything to us. And so I think I would really want her to know, like, she is not alone. Not only do I know how she feels and have felt that myself more times than I care to remember, but more importantly, the Lord knows how she feels. And the Lord is with her. And I think I would want to remind her of something that she already knows, but that maybe she's forgotten, which is that she is not forgotten. The Lord has not forgotten her. And he's with her, and he has been chasing after her and pursuing her. And I think I would want to remind her to just turn her eyes to Jesus, to fix her eyes on his face. And I think it's so easy when we get in the trenches of desires unfulfilled and seasons that we just don't want to be in, we feel like life has passed us by. But I would want to remind her to just fix her eyes on Jesus, because as long as your eyes are on Jesus, you are going where you need to go. You are exactly where you need to be. You're doing exactly what you need to do. If you are following Jesus, you don't have to worry about anything else going on in your life, in the world around you. Fix your eyes on Jesus. He is chasing after you. Just turn and face him. And I really hope that that's encouraging, because even though it doesn't necessarily, there's no like, oh, just do this and you'll get everything you want. But really and truly, like, Jesus is the prize. He is the goal. He is the dream. And if you're with him, if you're walking hand in hand, step in step with him, like, you are not going to miss out on what God has for your life as long as you are living in step with him. That's what I'm trying to say. You cannot miss what God has for you. You cannot be overlooked for what God has set aside for you if you are walking hand in hand with him. That's it.
Tiff, you're seriously so amazing. You have such a gift of encouragement. And I just know that I just know people are going to listen to this podcast and just be so touched by it and touched by the presence of God and his love. How can a Little More Courage community be praying for you? Or is there anything you want to share with our community about what's coming up in your life?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. I would love prayer for wisdom and direction on the lifestyle brand that I just launched called Wild Honey. It's at Hello Wild Honey on the socials. I am just doing this, bootstraps, pulling them up, whatever the saying is, like grassroots, whatever. I'm just trying to figure it out, like every part of this, every piece of this. This is a dream I've had for years, and the Lord has finally given me the go-ahead on it, and that's like a whole nother story for another time. But I really would love partners in prayer for what the Lord is doing in this through me, and just for direction on how to start and run and grow a business. I know that maybe that's really superficial, but that's where I'm at in my life right now, and that's what I would love just partners praying with me on.
Yeah, we'll be praying for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.
I love you, Riley. Thank you so much. This was awesome.